Well, I believe we are live. This is a special edition of Woke Women Wednesdays. It's not Wednesday, it is Friday. But as women, we have to remain woke at all times, all day, every day, especially in the times that we are living in. It is important to be in the know and understand what is at play. And so we have a situation, and we have someone who is going to help us understand what is happening. Um, and so she is no stranger to woke and to all things that deal with disruption. My sister in service, my sister in good trouble, my ride or die. Our very own Rachael Rollins is
Hello, my dear.
in tonight, or whatever this is called, StreamYard at Woke. So Rachael, I just want to say, first of all, thank you, because I am right now in Atlanta. News broke while I was away, and folks just started blowing up my phone. And people have this expectation that as a city councilor, I know everything, and I don't. And I'm going to be completely transparent and honest with you. I was under the impression that it was, I didn't know what a grand jury is and what an indictment is. And, I've been hearing things in the news of like resign from a position. And I felt like, don't you have to go to court? And there's a process, but she was already in court. So like, we're going to talk a little bit about the situation that is happening with our colleague counselor Tanya Fernandez Anderson, and more so from the perspective not so much about her case, but some of the things that we've been seeing on the news and in the media that has a whole bunch of folks out in these streets totally confused and unsure of what all of this means. So we're hoping, given your experience in law, and also your passion for really helping people understand and to be well informed and educated, we're hoping to spend a little bit of time with you to help us understand what all of this means.
Yeah, for sure. And so thank you for having me on, and I'd love to try to explain this. I want to start by saying I was not the U.S. attorney when this investigation started. I have no insider information about Counselor Fernandez Anderson. I am speaking only based on what I have read in the public record, right? We call that open source information. So this isn't inside baseball. I'm not sharing secrets about anything, but I can tell you that, as the elected district attorney of Suffolk County, which includes Boston, Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere, and then the presidentially appointed and United States Senate confirmed of the United States Attorney's Office as the United States Attorney, I understand these prosecutions, and I can explain to you a little bit about what happened this morning and maybe behind the scenes what was happening before people knew. Okay, so
I want to start off before we move through, because we started off with an arrest.
Yes.
And I don't even know how the media got there at 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't even know how the hell they knew about it before it all went. When I say help me understand.
Yeah, for sure. So let me start with some basic concepts so people can understand them. Okay. So the district attorney is a county job, right? It's basically the current DA, DA Hayden, is responsible for all of Boston, all of Chelsea, all of Winthrop, all of Revere. Mm-hmm. The DA works overwhelmingly with the Boston Police, Chelsea Police, Revere Police, Winthrop Police, State Police, and MBTA Police. Sometimes we work with federal agents, but overwhelmingly we work with local and state law enforcement. Most of what DAs do, Julia, are reactive. So when I was DA, I'm not saying they never have long-term investigations, but somebody calls 911 and makes a complaint, or it's something called shot spotter is activated. A gun is discharged. And what we find out is that, essentially that, somebody has shot somebody or something has happened, and the police are showing up in real time. And it is almost 100% reactive, meaning the Boston police might not know what's happening until they get there, or they're driving by and they witness a crime happening, stuff like that. At the U.S. Attorney's Office on the federal side, almost 100% of what we do is proactive, right? When you call 911, the FBI isn't taking that call. It's the Boston police or the state police, usually if you call 911 in our neighborhood, okay? So just starting with the DA's office is reactive overwhelmingly. The U.S. Attorney's Office is proactive, meaning they're underground for a long time. And when they pop up, they've usually, when we popped up as the U.S. Attorney, the FBI, ATF, DEA, HSI, the alphabet soup, we've been watching you and doing work for a really long time, or a long time before we come above ground, right?
Wow, okay.
So there were rumblings, remember, within the last couple weeks, potentially about the city councilor. Those are leaks, right? So when we issue,
help people understand what a leak is,
yes,
and how that, like,
so,
because I really want people. So you have to understand, there's so many of us who are all just trying to figure out what's
so here's what's going on. So let's take it out of, unfortunately, counselor, I know sadly that there's been like a shooting in a neighborhood that you live in or that you are responsible for as a counselor. If it happens outside of my home, I am startled and I run out, and that's when I start learning about what happened. Maybe the police know who the shooter is because the person's known to them. But when they show up, they're kind of learning a little bit with what's happening. Usually arrests are made by the local police if they witness a felony happening in front of them, or they are questioning people and then they believe they have enough to arrest. When the feds are coming for you, usually they have issued either a grand jury subpoena, which is, everyone's seen Law and Order, right? Usually they're, what you who are non-lawyers think about is a trial jury, right? So when you go to trial, you get to see their faces. You can walk into an open court. They don't have name tags, but they're not anonymous. You get to see who they are. But a grand jury is completely secret.
Wait a minute. Hold up. Because I'm gonna be doing this tonight. Who are those individuals, and how do they get selected to even be so secretive? Like, who are these people?
So even on the state and the federal side, it's the same. There are grand juries that happen, but let's just talk about the federal side. You would get in the mail. Have you ever been called for jury duty?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So you show up, sometimes you are summoned for grand jury duty or jury duty, right? And so remember, the grand jury, I like to call them the gatekeepers. They are the ones that get to decide on the federal side whether the federal government can indict you, whether they can move forward. And this document that I printed out, this is the indictment against Counselor Fernandez-Anderson. This is what every reporter had in their hand today when they were running after her, talking to her. If you saw them standing outside with this, it's an 11-page document. We'll get to this in a second, but that the grand jury returns. These words sound weird. It's not like English, right? Like the way we would speak about things. But basically what happens, Julia, is you are summoned and told, or, it's your civic duty that you have to show up at the federal courthouse, and you have been selected for jury duty, grand jury duty or trial jury duty.
And do you have to have, when you do the grand, do you need to have a special skill set? Do you need to be diverse? Like, how do they?
Great question. No, you need to be alive. You need to be, I believe only citizens are summoned for a grand jury duty, and essentially on the federal side, a grand jury is called for a really long time. It's either 18 months or 24 months. This is a huge commitment, right? And you basically sit either 1 day a week sometimes. And what else is different about the federal side is usually on a grand jury, you're only hearing a certain type of case, right? You might be the financial frauds and schemes grand jury. You might be the healthcare fraud grand jury. You might be the narcotics and money laundering grand jury. So you will only be hearing those type of cases. Now let's switch. When I was DA, we had grand juries as well on the state side, but you heard everything. We just had one grand jury, and you might hear a human trafficking case, and then someone else comes to you and might do a murder, and someone else comes to you and might do something about, a firearm or an armed assault with intent to murder, or, sort of violent, serious felonies that we are presenting to. So grand juries are secret. No one knows who they are. We know who they are, obviously, as the prosecutors, but no one gets to see them. I'm going to walk you through what a grand jury process is. First of all, they are under the control of the prosecutor. So when I was the DA, if you walk into Suffolk Superior Court and you look up to the left as you walk in, it used to say my name. Now it says DA Hayden's name, and it says what floor the grand jury is on. And you go up to that floor. It's secretive. You walk in. There's tons of police officers there, state troopers, local police officers, sometimes federal agents too. And you go in and you sit in your grand jury, and you are presented evidence by the prosecution. Now, this is very important, Julia. There's no judge. There's no defense attorney. There's no defendant. So it's very, very different than a trial jury, right? So it's 16 to 23 people that are all sitting in chairs, just folding chairs or regular chairs, and they are presented facts of cases by a prosecutor. Different prosecutors come in. They get to take sort of notes about it. Usually the case isn't presented all at the same time. I might bring one witness in one day, and then 2 weeks later, I get more grand jury time and I bring other witnesses in. And then I'm putting my case together, right? And then ultimately, when I'm ready, I ask the grand jury to what's called return an indictment. I present to them what I believe is enough evidence. Remember, there's no judge, there's no defendant saying, that's wrong, objection, I want to cross-examine this witness. No, it's all prosecutor all the time, and we only have to prove probable cause. We don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Go ahead.
Okay, wait a minute. So that people understand, can you define to us what is an indictment? Because these are the grand jury folks. Those are the ones who determine whether or not something is going to move forward. Like these people have a big role to play.
They have a huge role to play. They're the gatekeepers on the state side. They're the gatekeepers for us going from district court up to Superior Court. Right? Because remember, on the state side, like the Dorchester Division of the Boston Municipal Court, West Roxbury Division of BMC, East Boston, Southie, Charlestown, all of those, Julia, whenever there's a murder, they're arraigned in district court. And then we have to indict them up to Superior Court, right? So Superior Court is for far more important, violent, serious crimes, okay? So a grand jury is an indictment is basically a document that spells out the general allegations of what the prosecution is claiming happens. So it's factual in the beginning. When we look at this indictment for Counselor Fernandez Anderson, it starts with, it's always the United States of America versus the defendant, okay? When you're with the DA's office, it's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus the defendant, right? So you see the difference about the state or the federal government. That's on the left side. On the right side, we always have all of the violations, all of the criminal counts that we believe we can prove as the prosecutor. So right now there are 6 counts against Counselor Fernandez Anderson. 1 count of wire fraud, aiding and abetting, 5 counts of wire fraud, aiding and abetting, and 1 count of something called theft concerning programs receiving federal funds. We'll talk about that in a minute. Yep.
One question, right? Because it sounds like, in terms of just the prosecutors, they have been working on this case for a while because they've managed to get all of their stuff lined up. They brought it over to the grand jury. The grand jury decided that there was enough information to move this case to another level. But you just named 5 counts. I only keep hearing about one thing that she did. Why is it like because it happened more than once? Like, what is this 5 count situation?
Right. So I will get into the indictment in 1 second and walk through. It is usually because it happened multiple times. Like, that's a great question. So what people's brains are going to explode about is mail fraud and wire fraud are simply, I'm not saying no one does mail fraud anymore, but people aren't mailing letters, right? The U.S. Attorney's Office that I used to lead was opened in 1789. 1789, right? So there were no cell phones, there weren't computers back then, right? So wire fraud is now transferring information through a wire, right? Like sending a text, an email, withdrawing money from a bank, or, sending money through, transferring money, right? Wiring money to somebody. Those are all things when they cross state lines, that's a federal crime, right? So we can talk.
But just so people understand, right? Because it didn't cross state lines, it happened in Massachusetts. How is it a federal situation?
So I'll get into the indictment specifically. One of the things that we're going to talk about is in paragraph 8 of the indictment, for example. What they say is the city of Boston received over $10,000 of federal grant money in the calendar year 2023 from federal agencies, including United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, among other federal agencies. So because the city of Boston received federal money, $10,000 or more, and because Tanya gets her salary from the city of Boston, and they allege that she essentially got $7,000 in a kickback scheme, which we'll talk about in a minute, and this is all allegations, that could have been federal money, and therefore it's a federal crime.
Okay. Yeah, because that's another question that I've been getting is like, she's a city councilor. How is the FBI involved? And, what makes it that situation? But thank you for explaining that, because I think that a lot of folks were confused. And because there's so many different counts, and, we're going to talk about a little bit.
And one other thing, I'm sorry, let me read you paragraph 19 of the indictment. On June 9th, 2023, staff member A and defendant Fernandez Anderson exchanged the following texts, which traveled via interstate wire communications to coordinate the bonus check kickback to Fernandez Anderson. So the texts, even though they're both in Boston texting, what they're claiming is because it's an interstate wire communication, that's a federal crime, right? The bonus check is from Citizens Bank, which is a Rhode Island-based bank. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So because Citizens Bank, even though you came to Citizens Bank in Boston, they didn't go to Rhode Island. Citizens is based in Rhode Island, so it's federal. Do you see what bullshit this is? Excuse my language, right? Like, this isn't Rachael Rollins was running drugs from Massachusetts to Rhode Island and New Hampshire, human trafficking people from Maine all the way down the coast to whatever. It seems petty, right? Like, I'm just telling you, right? And for $7,000, I'm not saying she's innocent. I'm not saying she's guilty. I'm just saying, Julia, for the amount of media coverage we have right now, even though the Citizens Bank that was used was in Boston, the bank is based out of Rhode Island, so therefore it's an interstate crime. Do you hear me? Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, so we can find a federal nexus for anything we want. But remember, Julia, when all of those wealthy white men were found getting sexual favors from human traffickers, and the U.S. Attorney's Office didn't want to charge them federally and kicked it down to the state so all their names weren't made public. That's the type
Oh,
of,
can you say that one more time for those people in the back? Because
yeah.
it seems like it's
They
different.
can't, they don't want to find federal nexuses when it's people that look and live like them, right? Like what I used to say when I was U.S. Attorney is, you know what? Let's use the same zeal and excitement that we do for Black and brown 19-year-old men in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Lawrence and Lowell, right? And Holyoke, when we think creatively about how we are going to indict, you know, white nationalists, right? Or people that are human trafficking or receiving these, receiving the benefit of people that have been trafficked and harmed. So again, I mean, I will say, I think this is de minimis. The
Oh, wait,
fact
tell
that
people what that means, de minimis. What's that mean, y'all? For those who are,
it is minor, right?
so
This
it's not a
is,
big deal,
I'm
basically,
not saying it's not a big deal.
but it's
I'm saying
minor.
it's a small amount of money. According to them, the kickback she received was $7,000. There's usually a threshold, right? If you watch the press conference today with the interim United States attorney who I hired as my number 2, he applied to be U.S. attorney, didn't get an interview, called and begged me to be my number 2. I hired him, right? And brought him in. I left. He took over afterwards. He made it clear to say, hey, you know, we know it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but having faith and trust in elected officials is really important. And we'll do anything to make sure that that happens, even if it's a small amount of money, because this is over $7,000. And remember, Chuck Turner was $1,000, right? So they will reach down, and I guarantee you they will be spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars indicting, easily hundreds of thousands of dollars, indicting and charging and prosecuting City Councilor Fernandez Anderson over $7,000, right? So when you look at the cost benefit analysis of what's going on, you know, I'm not saying nothing should have happened if these allegations are true, but this could have been possibly resolved administratively. They could have said that it should have gone to the State Ethics Commission again, or some other thing like that. But if the federal nexus is you sent a text and your bank is based out of Rhode Island and the city of Boston received at least $10,000 from HUD at one point, right? That's tenuous.
Wow. So it sounds like, and not to say I'm not, you know, making any scenarios up here, but it sounds like if a lot of folks have been getting calls from people, it feels like a very targeted and I wouldn't say a witch hunt, because you know, right now we don't know what we don't know, but this is something that could have been handled differently, or maybe.
Well, I want people aware that like $7,000 is not usually the amount of money that we're going at. We went after Bernie Madoff, right? Like when the feds come, it's usually for the most violent, serious crimes, for the most horrific financial frauds and schemes. I'm not saying this isn't a big deal. It is important that elected officials comply with rules. I'm saying this is over $7,000, and it appears to some, I have heard as well. I'm not saying I believe it is. I'm just saying, as the former leader of this office, we are normally not prosecuting regular people for $7,000. We wouldn't wake up. You know, what did Naomi Campbell say? Like, I don't wake up, or Kate Moss, I don't wake up for less than $10,000 a day when she was a supermodel. Like, that's what I'm trying to say is, this is not my opinion. I'm just telling you factually, we are not normally going after people for $7,000. And that's why when Chuck Turner was prosecuted by this office for $1,000, it was even more significant because it was 7 times less than Tanya Fernandez Anderson. And I will end by saying, we do this in a lot of different cases, right? Like if a firearm is manufactured or made in a different state and found in Massachusetts, it's a federal crime because obviously the firearm had to travel through interstate commerce to get there, right? So let's say, I should know this, but let's say, a firearm is manufactured. Let me quickly look. Firearm is manufactured. All right, Glock manufacturer. Let's see. Let's say Glock's headquarters is in Austria. It's not just interstate commerce, it's international commerce, right? Like, so, but if a firearm is made in Massachusetts, right? It did not travel through interstate commerce, right? So, let me see. I should know this, but
No, but I think it's
Smith and Wesson is located in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Smith and Wesson?
Smith and Wesson is located in Springfield, Massachusetts. If I had a Smith and Wesson firearm and I was arrested with it, it would be hard to charge me federally, right? Unless I committed a federal crime with the firearm, exclusively for having the firearm because it was manufactured in Massachusetts. I'm in Massachusetts. It didn't cross interstate commerce. And let me just make one other connection. So back to the Citizens Bank, when you put your ATM card in and you take money out, there's a wire transfer happening, right? I'm not saying the money technically comes from Rhode Island, but all of these things are happening headquartered out of Rhode Island, right? Like technically everything trickles back to where the headquarters is of the agency. That's where the federal piece is for Tanya. Okay.
So 2 questions, right? One is that we were talking about leaking. So define what is leaking and why do those things happen? So let's start off with that, because that was also, I've heard several people say that this situation was leaked, and I don't know what that means or how was it like.
Yeah. So basically a leak it's not a legal term, right? Like it's it's
like snitching.
It's I'm not snitch. I mean, but it's usually from inside of our office, right? Like the grand jury process is secretive. There are rules requiring that we not talk about grand jury materials, right? That we not distribute grand jury materials, that we not have them in our possession, right? Aside from within the office. There are all these requirements. Those are held by us as the prosecution. Julia, if we subpoena you to come before the grand jury, you can tell anyone you want that you were subpoenaed. I just can't tell anyone as the prosecutor that subpoenaed you. Technically, if you watch the press conference today, the interim U.S. attorney said the grand jury returned an indictment. The grand jury subpoenaed. Yeah, but we convene the grand jury. It's not like we're Svengali, but we're asking them to do all of this, and they're the mechanism by which we do it, right? Everything that happens, even though it's secretive, there's a transcription of everything that happens before the grand jury, because it can't be completely secretive, right? Like what's going to happen? We're going to say later on, take my word for it. I promise you they said this, I said that. No, there's a transcript that ultimately in discovery, which we'll get to, we have to turn that over to the federal defender that's representing the city councilor who gets to see, okay, what did they say to the grand jury? There could be motions to dismiss based on the fact that, they didn't tell the grand jury all of this other information that might have been relevant to them. But remember, the grand jury, in order to return an indictment, you only have to meet the probable cause standard versus beyond a reasonable doubt. So leaks. So let me just finish. Leaks are usually from somebody who received, it's not a leak technically, but they're not having a press conference to say, I just received a grand jury subpoena. Let me tell you everything I think about, Counselor Fernandez Anderson or whoever they think there is being investigated. But I think what happens usually, and this is my opinion, I used to run the office, is someone from the office calls the Herald or the media to say, hey, you didn't hear it from me, but the FBI is arresting city councilor so-and-so this morning. They used to do it all the time when I was U.S. attorney, right? So, and they like that because then they look like they're doing their job, right? Like they drop a dime. How the hell else would the Herald know to be there?
Everybody was there.
But hold on. At 7 a.m., they did tweet, we're having a press conference at 9:30. An indictment was just unsealed regarding the arrest of Tanya Fernandez Anderson, right? So that's why people were at the courthouse. But I'm talking about
in her morning in her house. I saw footage at 6 o'clock in the morning. There were media cameras at her house.
So somebody leaked it. Somebody leaked that they were going there, right? And now it doesn't just have to be the U.S. Attorney's Office, right? Remember, the FBI arrested her. The FBI could have leaked it, right? So what I got frustrated about is no one ever cares about those leaks, right? Like there's no leaks investigation by the Department of Justice when it is leaked that we're doing something good. But they get really pissed if they think somebody leaks. And by the way, the only person that has the ability to speak to the media without seeking approval is the U.S. attorney. But they were really pissed when I was saying to the media, quietly, but still saying it as the U.S. attorney, hey, we're investigating Everett because we think we're tired of reading 600 articles about how racist they are. The fact that there's a superintendent of schools that's sexually assaulting people and has multiple criminal charges, that he was never fired, that a woman of color is trying to change all of that and her contract wasn't renewed. I didn't know anything about Everett. I just was sick of reading the news all the time. So leaks happen usually from federal agents or members from the U.S. Attorney's Office. However, they could also happen from somebody that received a grand jury subpoena to come and testify before the grand jury or whatever else. They can do whatever they want. That's not unlawful. But when an FBI agent or a Department of Justice employee is leaking grand jury material, that is a violation that is rarely looked into by the Department of Justice. And they don't care because it usually makes the department look good, right? Wow. They look like they're doing great work because they're rooting out public corruption. But, like they got footage of Tanya when she walked out of her house this morning. And that's why they also know Tanya walked out of the back of the federal courthouse. They knew that's where she was coming out of and when she was leaving. They might have just positioned themselves there. There's only 2 exits from the building, right? But yeah, it's usually the office letting people know because they want goodwill from the media.
Yeah. So there's another question. Do they always pursue cases for $7,000? Is this a rare occurrence, or is this like, I don't know? Is this
there are not written thresholds that I am aware of from the Department of Justice, but usually no. I would argue no, and that's not that's my opinion as the U.S. attorney when I was in the role. But even today, when you watch the press conference, and it was live, but you can pull it up. One of the media asked that question, like, is this really just about $7,000? To which, and it's a good answer, but it's also going to be something I'm sure Counselor Fernandez Anderson's defense attorney is going to focus on is, this is unusual, right? And, if it were me being a defense attorney, and people have called me and asked me this, and it's not just my opinion, a lot of people are saying this is, even with the press conference today, Julia, the questions were about the mayor of Lawrence, who's Dominican, right?
I didn't watch. For the record, everybody, I'm in a conference in Atlanta, so I have not been paying it. So just so you know, who did they talk about in the press conference?
So they one of the questions from the media after the press conference ended, because the interim U.S. attorney spoke, and then the deputy special agent in charge of the FBI spoke, and then I think a deputy from the IRS spoke. Those were the two federal agencies and the prosecutor were all there discussing the matter. Then the media gets to ask a question. Somebody said, isn't this reminiscent of, I think, Correa is the name of the mayor from Lawrence, I believe. But I'm 90% sure, but a Dominican man.
Lantigua.
No, not Lantigua. The one
another one? Oh my gosh.
There's another one, right? But anyways, Lantigua was Lawrence, but there was a mayor that was indicted. He had girlfriends and all this other stuff and was spending all this money and lying all the time, whatever. Dominican. Then somebody else says, oh, well, like 3 questions later, interim U.S. Attorney Levy, what did you say about Chuck Turner? And then he said, no, they weren't talking about the Chuck Turner case. They were talking about the Correa case. Chuck Turner, black man. They didn't mention Diane Wilkerson in the press conference, but on the media, they're showing Diane Wilkerson. And the only 2 other people they're talking about is Counselor Ricardo Arroyo and Counselor Kendrick Lara. The media.
In today's news.
In today's media that they're talking about
people of color.
All people of color and
That's
the people.
We're the only ones that are out here acting the fool, basically.
Well, and so, what was interesting was nobody mentioned Sal DeMacy, who was the Speaker of the House in Massachusetts and is a convicted felon, or Tom Finneran, who was the Speaker of the House in Massachusetts, was a convicted felon, both white men, Italian, Irish, who served time and came out, and Finneran got a radio show immediately. DeMacy had federal judges fighting for him to get out because he had cancer, which is awful. And they were like, he's going to die there. That was 15 years ago. He's still alive. I'm not saying I want him dead, but I am saying this mofo is alive, right? And by the way, both of them are lobbyists right now, making several $100,000 a year.
Nice.
So white men get prosecuted by our office, are still considered experts in their field who made a mistake and served their debt to society and are hired by Vertex and several other Fortune 50 companies, right, or 100 companies, let alone 500 companies, and are able to dust their shoulders off and move on. Meanwhile, Diane Wilkerson just got a job, and the Herald and media wrote 100 articles. Mm-hmm. And Joe Feaster had to come out and say,
even for you,
she's qualified. Forget about me.
Well, no, I'm just saying, your ass, they would not even you got a job.
I'm more qualified than so many lawyers in this state, but they're saying for allegations, no trial, no indictment. This was 2 people that wrote a report about me, and it's like, die. They want you to die, right? If you read the Herald articles about me, it's like, why is she still alive? How is she able to have a job? They don't treat people that way. Turtle Boy, Lizard Man, whatever his name is, creepy crawler. This mofo is written about in the Herald like he's a civil rights icon. He has dozens of felony charges pending against him, and it's just, we aren't treated the same way.
And right? I have a case against him myself for all of this. But listen, you know what? I wanted to say that Romilda is here, and she says, give us back our DA, which is, we want you back. And then she also just wanted, for the record, and I do appreciate it, I believe she's saying that the guy from Lawrence is Dominican, but his name isn't Correa. Correa is the guy from the South Shore, and he's Portuguese. And he's from Fall River. Joa says, and so just so you know,
oops, you know what? I take it back, and I appreciate.
I mean, I know
Dominicans. Don't have me be mean to Dominicans. Apologies. I start right now. I just want to make sure. Let me double check for Joa and Romilda. Who in the hell am I talking about? Just hold on.
Dominicans nowadays, we out here getting.
No, I know. I take it back.
But
Lo siento. Right?
No, we're good. We're good.
Correa. Indictment.
Let's figure out who's who, and I just, and Stacy, oh, okay, Stacy's also here. She says, I love Rachel. Mofos love it. Like, you're getting some love here. And then Stacy also said, that's right. Why was IRS present if this was supposedly a campaign funds that from the state committee finance office? That was another situation, Stacy, not the one that she got in trouble for allegedly at this point. And then Anne also had asked some questions that I asked on her behalf. She was the one who was asking about, is it normal for $7,000 cases to be like this? I will say while you're looking.
All right. Apologies to Joa and Romilda from me. Jaziel Correa II, the former mayor of Fall River, correct, Mass, was sentenced today. This was before I was U.S. attorney. Blah, blah, blah. Failed wire fraud, failed to file tax returns. Blah, blah, blah. I want to make sure, and they don't. So it's funny. They don't say, and that was one of the things I required the office to stop saying, is usually they'd be like, Dominican man did something terrible. Nigerian man did so. So I'm like, do we say white man and embezzled again, right? Like why is the nationality of somebody, unless it's an illegal reentry case or your nationality is an element we have to prove, right? Like if you unlawfully enter our country, we have to prove that you're not a citizen. So if they say, Bayesian woman, okay, but like stop. We only talk about immigrants and we never say Finnish asshole, right? Or like Irish jerk, right? It's like, come on, what are we doing?
I know.
Right. So apologies, not Dominican. I don't know if
it's all good because Dominicans will be out here,
man, I don't need that smoke.
Milda, they wanted to just, and I appreciate them uplifting, and I'm so happy that we have people who are tuning in.
Oh, and let me also say out loud, it did warm my heart to see Romilda and Joa supporting Tanya today, right? Like I have been a person who has, as the DA sat and watched people, arrested and have their initial appearance or arraignment. I have been the U.S. attorney and watched that. I have been a sibling and been sitting in court and watched that. And it's lonely. It's terrible, right? And so to have people there, and I need everyone to remember, you are innocent until proven guilty, right? And like this is a damning document, right? It does not look good, but this is a financial crime, right? Essentially, right? And they're claiming it's a kickback of $7,000. We have embezzlers, right, who engage in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fraud, that there's no press conference and whatever else. I get it. She's an elected official, but I do feel like
what's his name? Trump, doesn't he got a whole bunch of stuff and he's still out here going to be.
Well, he's the president, right? And so I will just say to you that, I think let's let the process work itself out, and I will say, I tweeted for the first time. I don't even know if tweeted is a word anymore. But for the first time in a year and a half, this morning, and basically wanted to remind people that there was this is what it said. There was a press conference for Gang Chen's arrest and a press release after his indictment. Complete arrogance and certainty about the arrests and prosecutions of Roger Bonsi and Joseph Baptiste. Every single charge got dismissed. And then I said, worst case scenario, she becomes a huge lobbyist like Finneran and DeMacy with like side eye, because we know that's not going to, let's let the process work itself out and see what ultimately ends up happening. But I want to tell you, as the U.S. attorney for only a year and a half, I had 3 full exonerations. I had 3 people that not me, but the people before me, had press releases saying that they had, violated national security, or violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act were awful, scum of the earth people. And then later we're like, oops, we can't prove the case, right? And I was told as U.S. Attorney by the Department of Justice, file a 1-sentence dismissal late on a Friday afternoon, no comment.
Yeah.
And I said, I won't do it.
Yeah.
I won't do that. No, nobody knows who you guys are. I have a name and a reputation to uphold. Gang Chen is Chinese, Baptiste and Bonsi, Haitian. They don't do this to people that aren't, others, right? Right? Like they don't do this to people like themselves.
Yeah.
And I said, we should have a press conference to say that we were wrong.
Yeah.
And of course was told we couldn't. And then I made sure we had a press release for both of them, for all 3 dismissals. And then even with our college admission scandal case, one of the biggest cases out of our office, we got several not guilties in those cases. So we couldn't prove our case. And a trial jury heard the facts and said, you lose, government. And then several of our biggest parts of those cases were flipped on appeal. So we are not always right, Julia. There is no profession in the world that gets it right every single time. The Department of Justice is exactly the same. And, Republican and Democrat, the current president and the president-elect have both said that DOJ is political. They have used their pardon powers or threatened to do so because they don't believe the system works the way that it's supposed to. So I'm not saying definitively that means Tanya's innocent or guilty. I'm not saying anything about that. But the same zeal with which the Herald readers are saying Trump was framed for everything he did, or Turtle Man needs to be freed, or all the other stuff they scream, and the same way, that Joe Biden is pardoning his own son, his blood relative, right? You know what's funny about this indictment? There's a rule in the city of Boston that you can't hire an immediate family member.
Right.
Right?
The woman in question, I understand it's not an immediate family member.
Agreed.
So I'm
Agreed.
confused by that. Like, why are they like, it doesn't make any sense. So is it bad reporting or just choice of words and what you're trying to do?
I think what they're trying to imply is that, because in paragraph 10 of the indictment, they say, in or about November 2022, defendant Fernandez Anderson emailed a City of Boston employee regarding her hiring of staff member A, falsely representing that she and staff member A were not related. So it says, hi, blank. It's redacted. The blank is a big black line because they don't want to say who she emailed. I hope you are well. I'm very pleased to announce that blank, for the record, blank is not related to me, will join my office as blank, will begin blank journey with us on blah, blah, blah. Please support with onboarding. Salary will be whatever, $65,000 a year. So they're implying that was, you can only be charged with making a false statement to a federal agent. They're just implying she lied when she said this. Now, I don't know. I haven't spoken to Tanya about this. I don't know whether this is just white people not understanding that, like, Ramilda and Joe are going to yell at me that, like, I defy you to find a Cape Verdean that isn't related to another Cape Verdean somewhere in Boston, right? Like, it's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? So I don't know whether this is the equivalent of black cousins, right? Or, like, I don't know what Dominicans, what the version is of that, but it's like, if this is my aunt through a marriage, is that, like, I don't know. I don't know I can't speak to the truth or falseness of this, but I'm just giving an example of, like, she's not related to me. I don't know whether that's a true statement or not, but I do know the rule is immediate family member, and there's a definition of what that is. And this person doesn't meet that definition.
And I think, and I'm not, again, I am not speculating or serving as someone who is, but to provide some context, I think if this was in relation to the ethics violation, I think she was just clearing for the record, just in case you are wondering.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It could have been as simple as that. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
But one of the questions that Ramilda had here is that, let me go back up to it. It says,
Damn, Ramilda's blowing up our spot.
yeah, she says, why is it that cases that are for district courts making it to federal court? We're seeing a lot of this in our community. So has there been a shift, or have you been seeing any, like, and if so, why do you think that is?
So what one distinction, and Ramilda, I know is an expert on all of this too. One distinction between the federal and the state system is the state has district court, superior court, mass appeals court, and then the Supreme Judicial Court. So and of course there's like housing court, juvenile court, like whatever, like other sort of specialty courts, right? Maybe. But there's tons of cases that only stay in district court. If they're misdemeanors, low-level felonies, they will never get indicted up to superior court. The difference on the federal side is there's just one U.S. district court. There's not like a two-tiered system. You go before a magistrate judge, usually when you're arraigned, and then to what's called an Article 3 judge. It's just Article 3 of the Constitution. They are lifetime appointees on the federal side. So you could be 108 years old, basically a pile of sand, and rolled out every day if you're alive, and continue doing cases. We've had situations where judges are, have dementia, and you can't fire them, right? They have a lifetime appointment. On the state side, when it's like Weekend at Bernie's, you roll out a dead body, right? And they just yell guilty, or whatever, and then fall back asleep or die. On the state side, when you're 70, no matter what, you retire, right? They can sometimes on the appeals court, they would recall judges when they had a huge backlog or whatever, but you have to retire at a certain age. So I don't know, Ramilda, whether some of these district court cases on the state side, right? It's called adoption, meaning the federal government reaches in and takes the case federally. We do this a lot. I was not happy, and it was one of the things I said I didn't want to do as U.S. attorney, is why are we adopting felon in possession cases, right? That can easily be handled by the DA. And when we adopt them federally, they get so much more time on the federal side than they do. And the argument in theory sounds good, maybe, right? Like, oh, these are bad guys and we got to get them out of our community for a long time. But none of them are, very few of them are going to get life. Yeah. And they're not getting treatment and services and the things that they need on the federal side. And by the way, there's one federal prison in Massachusetts, right? None of these people are going to serve their time in our state. Their families are going to have to be traveling to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, all over the place.
Yeah, I want to say something really quick about a few things that people who are paying attention, like about a bigger systemic issue, is that a lot of our people who are in federal prison right now, who are from Boston, when it comes to the census, they're getting counted in whatever state that they happen to be occupied in, right? Or is or do they get
outrageous? It's outrageous. I think
so. I think that I just want to be clear for people to understand, like, how we are. There's that, to me, is the whole prison pipeline situation. It is such a fabricated way to take advantage of people.
For sure. Congresswoman Presley fought very hard, as did many city councilors, et cetera. So let's say you stay in our state. Mm-hmm. And you are at MCI Norfolk, right? But you're from Mattapan, Roxbury, Dorchester, Lawrence, I don't know where. Your body is counted in Norfolk, right? And so the census technically is about, and Congress is working hard to make sure that, are they counted, they're Congress people, looking to make sure that they are counted where they actually would reside after the fact. Now, I don't know whether the census, I should know the answer to this, I promise, I just don't. Whether you're counted as a Norfolk body or where you are. It might be when the census takes place, wherever you are located, that's your address.
So, and I believe that's the case.
Yeah.
Because that is how certain neighborhoods like ours get disinvested.
Of course. And of course, after
and that's all part of the listen, you guys, when we're talking about criminal justice system, all of these things are interconnected. All of these things are interconnected. I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist, but I will say that there is a direct correlation around the census and the resources and the bodies of our loved ones who are in federal prison right now. All of these things are things for us to pay attention to. And I got some questions that I want to bring into the space, because we've been encouraging folks to tap in, and I see Leslie Credo's in the building. So thank you.
Hi, Leslie.
Thank you. And then Ramila just said, feds have more private prisons, just feeding us to them. Absolutely. So here's a question from Stacy. She wants to know, how are federal charges chosen? Aren't there structures like interstate trafficking across state lines, several state sentences, federal guidelines and jurisdiction? Like, how do they take precedence? I believe that's something that we covered earlier in regards to kind of like the cell phone, where the bank, the parent company, where if it's in
there are some. Was that Stacy? You said her name was?
So
Stacy, there are some crimes that are exclusively federal. No matter what happens, we are the only ones that can handle it. So national security, terrorism, like, for example, the marathon bombing, right? Like, at the beginning, they didn't know what it was. And, at the marathon, the Boston police, EMT, Boston Fire were the ones that were right there. And so that's why, I think Ed Davis and Dan Conley and all the people that were in those roles at the time handled it. What's interesting is it was pulled federally, and Tsarnaev was charged after the 4-day manhunt, right? Federally with terrorism crimes. But remember, there were murders that happened. The Suffolk DA's office allowed the federal government to take those homicides, but the Middlesex DA, when Sean, I think, Collier, the police officer at MIT, was murdered, Marion Ryan, who was the DA at the time, charged Tsarnaev with a homicide because DAs in Massachusetts have exclusive jurisdiction over homicides. We can give that jurisdiction away if we choose, but no one can take it from us. Yep. On the federal side, we can't give away terrorism. We can't give away national security. We exclusively handle that. Let me just give one other example. DAs can handle human trafficking, labor trafficking, which is sex or work, right? Trafficking. What is interesting is when it crosses state lines is usually when the feds get involved. There's another whole entity that we haven't discussed yet, the state attorney general, Andrea Campbell. The attorney general is elected. So is the DA. The U.S. attorney is appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. So 2 of them are elected, 1 of them is appointed. What's interesting is the DA is only criminal. I only had criminal jurisdiction. I could only put people in, prosecute them for crimes and then ask for a criminal sentence, either of jail or some probation or restitution or something. The attorney general and the U.S. attorney, I like to call them ambidextrous. They can handle civil matters as well as criminal matters. And the easiest way to distinguish between the two is civil is usually stop doing that or give me money, or both. Stop doing that and give me money, right? And criminal is and go to jail, right? Like, we can take away your liberty on the criminal side are the ways you distinguish this, right?
Yep. Yeah. So thank you for that breakdown. And I think we take it, some folks, this is a privilege, right? To sometimes, I always say that information is not just
power.
It's power, but it's also currency, because there are people who have a lot of it and there's people who are dying for it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so grateful that we're taking the time to really break these things down, because for me, I heard about the grand jury, then I heard about an indictment, and then I heard that she was in court, that she was going to get arraigned, and then I'm hearing in the news that my, the mayor had called for her resignation and other council colleagues, and I'm like, I don't understand. Like I thought that there was like I thought that she wasn't coming back out. Like so I'm
Yeah,
just can you help me understand kind
for
of like
sure.
what that's all about and
Yes.
yeah.
So this morning, um, when she left her house, I'm told, right? I did not see the video. She was arrested by the FBI. She was likely handcuffed, put in the back of a vehicle, and I believe drove directly to the courthouse. There is a processing that happens with the U.S. Marshals, like whether the FBI brought her in and they all coordinate before. My understanding is she waited in a cell downstairs in the building for 8 hours is what the media was reporting. This is not any insider information I have. I'm just telling you what I've seen on all of the news channels. If that is not accurate, it is not my fault. It is, blame Fox News or whatever was playing it. She is brought up through the belly of the building, not the way we walk in the front door. She is escorted up by marshals, depending on which courtroom she was in. She may have been handcuffed or her hands weren't cuffed. Some judges require, people to be handcuffed. Others don't. I mean, it's their privilege and protocol. There was, she had an attorney with her. I am assuming it was a a federal defender is what they're called. I don't know that to be true. I can look that up and get you the answer to that, but there was definitely a man walking with her outside. Actually, where are Joa and Ramilda? They were there. Can they tell us? I don't know whether that was
I hope, I'm sure they're still here. Romilda, Joa, can you let us know if she had representation?
I know she had representation. They would not, that would have been news if she said, I want to represent myself.
Okay, so she did. Okay. They haven't said anything yet.
Okay, all right.
Oh yes, Joa said that yes, she had an attorney, and yes, it was federal defense. Joa said
exactly. So remember, if like state court or federal court, and anyway, look, I was the DA and the U.S. attorney. If there are people that have other information or their experience is different than what I'm describing, we need to hear that, because I'm telling you the way it should be. But what I love about this conversation, Julia, is things don't often happen the way that it should be. And part of what I tried to do as DA and why I issued that memo is I didn't want to just say, oh, well, I told my staff. It's like, well, no, your staff isn't doing it. If it's written down somewhere, then everyone needs to know what the damn rules are. And that's why my phone was always blowing up with people that are like, it's not working. Any of your, employees in the West Roxbury division of the Boston Municipal Court, right? They just let a white woman go for drunk driving and just, moved forward with an arraignment of a black man who was drunk somewhere and did whatever. And then I'd say, tell me the name of the person or who was the judge. And then that day they'd be in my office, or I'd say to Danny Mulhern, my first assistant, what happened in West Roxbury? And that's the way things should be working, right? There needs to be uniformity. So again, I think, Julia, for me, like, she would have had to fill out forms to determine whether she was eligible for public counsel, a federal defender. Obviously, if you're a Rockefeller, and you have 9 trust funds and 4 houses on Nantucket and live in, Newton, right? And all of you're paying all your kids' college tuition and playing pickleball all day and, flying in your private jet, you don't get a federal defender. You have to pay for your own counsel. But if you are what is defined, this is not my word, theirs, as indigent, you either get a free counsel, right? And when people are arrested, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. You have the right to an attorney, even if you can't afford one, so those type of things happen, but there's paperwork that occurs. She gets a lawyer. She gets to speak to her lawyer for a little bit of time. And then she is brought up. She is given a copy, or her lawyer, usually before getting to court, is given an actual copy of the indictment. I don't know whether there was also an arrest warrant that was attached to this. So the indictment is just telling you what it is that happened. Usually when we go before a grand jury, we ask for the indictment it's called a true bill, meaning, yes, we believe in this, or a no bill, meaning, no, you didn't meet your burden and we aren't going to do it. The foreperson of the grand jury signs it, and so does the prosecutor that presented. And the deputy clerk of the court signed this as well. We usually also ask for an arrest warrant to be signed, as well as, I don't know if this happened, but we frequently also ask for a search warrant if we're going to search things, not just a home, but for example, a phone, a computer, a car, a garage, whatever, you can insert whatever it is we might be looking at, but we try to make sure we cover all of our bases so that we're doing those things all at once.
So all of this, but then she went back to court at 2:30, but before 2:30, people were already saying that she should resign. And
because they had read the indictment. So at 7 o'clock, right?
So there was that's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, let me explain.
Yeah.
At 7 a.m. this morning, well, before that, if you're telling me that there was media at her house at 6 a.m., before the U.S. Attorney's Office tweeted, somebody leaked that the FBI was going to arrest Tanya this morning. That's the only way the media would know about it, because if only the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office knew, we would be the ones showing up. But I need to be clear to you, Tanya, at 6 o'clock in the morning, when federal agents, they didn't raid her home, right? But if they we've raided houses before, right? Where we do a no-knock warrant, where we quickly knock on the door and then bust the door open and go in, guns. They didn't do that, is my understanding, but we have done that in the past. You wake up, you know what the hell is going on, or you see sirens, or you hear whatever. Some people might call the police. Some people might be taking videos on their phone. If you're telling me the media was there, somebody leaked it to the media.
It was in her house. But
so that's number one. Number two, 7 a.m., the U.S. Attorney's Office tweets, we were having a press conference at 9:30,
right.
Breaking news, press conference at 9:30, right? The press, and the only reason they announce it is because the indictment is unsealed, right? We usually file an indictment and everything under seal, because they don't arrest them and then go back and start typing the stuff up. We have all the paperwork ready, and then we unseal the indictment, and then it becomes public, right? So anyone can go in and, look up case 1, 2, 4, right, whatever, or even with the press release, it's a hyperlink. It's attached to it. So what happened is the mayor, the city council president, all of the city councilors, and anyone else read the indictment. And, they don't write indictments. No one ever reads an indictment and says oh my God, I love them. They sound great. We write it in a way that you sound like you're a criminal, right? Why would we indict somebody if we didn't think they did something wrong?
But the question is, and then I have 3 questions that are from the chat. But what I'm trying to understand is, if she hasn't gone to trial yet, right? So this was just, she went to court, but it wasn't trial.
No, so it's just an initial appearance in arraignment, right?
So there was no verdict about her actions. So
exactly, she pled not guilty, and now the process starts. And what is disappointing about people calling for her resignation, this is my opinion, I forget about Tanya, right? I'm just talking about this statement can't be, both of these things can't be true, right? You're innocent until proven guilty, but the allegations are so terrible that you should resign, right? Yeah. And that's kind of what's happening, right? People are saying both things. It's so what if, and I'm not saying this, I don't know anything about Tanya's case, but what if 7 weeks from now, they say, oops, sorry, who is it? who the hell is the person? Like
Staff.
staff member A
Yeah.
just said they lied, and they're missing. They fled the country. They retracted their statements, and we can't move forward. Whatever. Now, granted, they have their grand jury test. Whatever. But if the case crumbles and Tanya, they dismiss the indictment, right? Do people apologize to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I've seen
They're
cases.
asking her to resign, then she loses her like I don't understand that part, but I just was a little bit confused about.
Yeah, no trial
court.
has happened. All they've
Right.
done is issued an indictment.
Right. So she needs to have her day in court. So I have 3 questions that people want me to ask. First, and Paula Correa is here. She wants to know, she says, thank you for breaking down the process. Why wasn't she allowed to turn herself in if she wasn't a flight risk instead of having a media spectacle? Which is like, I'm sure that she probably knew that this situation was going on, or that well, at least, yeah, when they said there was a probe, like, couldn't she at that point just say, like, why this is a good question. Why did they allow?
I mean, we frequently allow wealthy, overwhelmingly white men who engage in financial crimes, nonviolent financial crimes, to self-report, right? Turn themselves in, because you know what? They can pay for the best lawyers. That used to be the U.S. attorney, right? That used to be the Attorney General of the United States or the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, who know all of the rules. That, let me be very clear to you about something. If Karen Reed had a public defender, right? Public defenders are excellent lawyers, but they also have hundreds at times, or dozens and dozens of other cases. A public defender isn't going to be doing what Yannetti and Jackson are doing. They're round the clock. All they're working on is the Karen Reed trial. And that's why Karen Reed is filing all these motions and winning. They got to move out of a certain courtroom because Yannetti and Jackson, or Yannetti at the time, claimed, oh, well, when you sit as a juror, you can only see the side of the witness's face, and that's not fair. And so part of me wanted to say, Julia, well, what about all the hundreds of people that got convicted in that courtroom with juries that couldn't see the witness's face? Wow. Why does only Karen Reed get that, the benefit of that argument? Whatever. So I guess for me, I just sort of feel like, I'm not saying I think they should have given her the opportunity to self-surrender, but I do believe that if she had been able to afford, a $1,000, $2,000 an hour lawyer who used to be the head of the public integrity or public corruption unit at the U.S. Attorney, she could afford Brian Kelly, who used to be the head of public corruption at the U.S. Attorney's office and is now being vetted or named as a potential U.S. attorney prospect. He would have said she'll self-surrender. He would have already had 8 meetings with the U.S. Attorney's office when the articles started coming out about, no. Let's get her before they know all the tricks. They might have had Tanya, maybe not, but Tanya might have presented to the grand jury, right? What are you talking about? I want to go before the grand jury myself. Mm-hmm. Or I want to present to let's present to the U.S. Attorney's office before they decide to ask for the grand jury to return an indictment, right? They knew maybe, right, that grand jury subpoenas had issued. They had been reading the same articles all of us had. So when you have the money to hire the best lawyers that understand the system better than anyone and only have time for your case because you're paying them, you get very different outcomes. And I will end by saying, as U.S. attorney, I had dozens of meetings with very wealthy pharmaceutical companies that we were looking into for horrendous violations, hundreds of millions of dollars, not $7,000, hundreds of millions of dollars of violations, that were able to hire an entire conference room full of lawyers, all of whom, one used to be the Solicitor General of the United States of America, great lawyers that were fighting with us to say, no, don't indict. We're going to file an appeal. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And we were working out all these deals because they knew how to play the system and they had the money to do it.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And I want to reiterate like how important it is for us. Knowledge is power, y'all. And we are actually having the opportunity to ask all the questions that has been on all of our minds. And we haven't had the right people in the right space to be able to break it down. So Rachel, I just want to say thank you, because this has been so incredibly, like, the folks who are tuning in, the people who will look at this later. I mean, like, this is how we educate and inform our own people. Now, the media hasn't been doing a good enough job, because everything's just been like a big, I don't know, it feels like a tabloid. It just feels like this is for me, this is real news. Like, I'm not a news reporter, but I feel like what we're doing right now is just speaking about the facts, helping people understand all of the things that are at play, because all of the behind the scenes is really all the things that I think are the important steps and information that you're sharing. Somebody says here, and Leslie actually, and I've also gotten this from some folks too, is what is it about her being very vocal about the disparities in the city of Boston between the privileged and the unprivileged? The powers that be did not like it. So there's been this, there's this trend, and you know this to be true, Rachel, that people like me and you and all the ones who have big mouths, who are out here fighting and being a little bit disruptive, there seems to be a target on our backs. And I'm going to be honest, like, to see what happened to my colleagues, to see what happened to you, to see what is happening to Tanya, all of this, for those folks who are tuning in, this is very traumatizing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get emotional, because I love my job and I love what I do for my people, but it has been so incredibly hard to see year after year, article after article, about how we are all just in the news and always, what is happening here?
Yeah. It's, and you know what it reminds me of? And I love you. But it reminds me when President Biden said that the Justice Department is trying to break Hunter. And I'm like, really? From Nantucket on Thanksgiving, you're going to say, with your family on Nantucket, which is basically the wealthiest per capita space on the planet Earth, right? Like, breaking your son Hunter, who should be the face of crack cocaine, because crack has done nothing good for our communities. Hunter, it has done wonderful things for Hunter Biden, right? Like, he's been pardoned, he's been able to, do whatever he wants and whatever. But Julia, I look at it and they're trying to break us. They want to break our spirit. They hate to see happy, confident, brilliant, brown and Black women that are not like shucking and jiving or asking for permission to exist, who are stunningly beautiful, right? Like you, and are living their best lives and calling out the hypocrisy as we see it. And they know it's true, right? Like, for me, when I say, like, oh, maybe Tanya, worst case scenario, if she's, convicted and sentenced, maybe Vertex will hire her to be a lobbyist. That shit isn't true.
Yeah.
Vertex doesn't hire people like us. They hire Tom Finneran, right? Like, and by the way, Vertex also won't hire a convicted felon to even work in their building, but they'll hire a convicted felon to be their lobbyist. So when we are smart and we can point out the hypocrisy and they have nothing to say back, but, okay, we hadn't thought of that. We know you haven't, because you're white and you're privileged and you don't have to think that way, right? Like, again, it's just, look at all of the news reporters surrounding Tanya, right? What is Tanya's jury going to look like? You think any of her jurors are going to wear hijab? You think any of her jurors are going to be Muslim? Let me point out one other huge distinction. At least with Suffolk County juries, you see brown people, you see Black people, you see Asian people, you see young people, you see old people. Federal juries are pulled from every city and town in our entire state. Do you know that I had no idea there is a Florida, Massachusetts? There are farmers like that are on, like farmers holding a pick and a hoe, right? Like on our juries for people in Suffolk County, right? Like, And we don't get a jury of our peers. And what I used to say to people is, when police officers are charged with excessive force, could you imagine if a police officer charged with excessive force got an all-black jury? By the first black juror that was seated in the jury pool, not the grand jury pool, the trial jury pool, because you don't get to know who the grand jurors are. But I've seen our grand jurors, because I'm the U.S. attorney and the DA. There are black and brown grand jurors in the Suffolk County grand jury all the time. I think I've seen 2 total in the federal grand jury. So every one of the narcotics and money laundering unit cases, Julia, every surname is Dominican, Cape Verdean, or black. There's virtually no white defendants in those units, right? And they aren't getting grand juries or trial juries of their peers. That's why there is a dope federal judge, Nancy Gertner, white woman ally, who was a federal judge in Boston and said, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of seeing black and brown defendants with all white juries sentencing them. They're not getting a jury of their peers, right? And she tried to pull from Suffolk County jurors jury pools, and they wouldn't allow her to do it. So there are systems set up that don't benefit us, right? And, you know, what's great is the head of the Federal Defender's Office is a black woman. She's dope as hell. She is brilliant. She is a defender at heart, Tara Allen. We went to law school together. I know she is working really hard at making sure that these lawyers are exceptional. But I want to, stress that the federal defenders are brilliant. They do a great job, but they aren't able to only handle one case. They have multiple cases. And so when you can afford a lawyer that used to be the U.S. attorney, that used to be the attorney general of the United States, that knows everyone in DOJ, you get better outcomes.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. And there's so much you're getting like you're watching this. Yeah, you're getting a lot of love here, and yeah, we need more of this. And this is real news, just so everybody knows. In case,
and just I will end by saying something you said to me, which is true, right? Look, Ruthie and President Ruthie and Mayor Wu and all the other people that have called for Tanya to resign, they have the right to their own opinion, right? But what I can say is, let's let the process, it's ultimately Tanya's prerogative, right? But I've resigned from a job. You don't get to unresign, right? Like, even when you are an elected official, if you resign, that sparks certain things happening, right? So, and I will say, remember with Chuck Turner, the $1,000, right, matter that he dealt with, he said he was going to fight it. He pled not guilty, said he was going to fight it, got convicted. And immediately after his conviction, the Boston City Council voted to remove him. I think it was 11-1. Turner abstained from voting. Yancey voted against it. I think Ayanna gave a very emotional speech, but, and supportive speech, but ultimately voted to have him removed. And they did it after he was convicted, but before he was sentenced. And that was not consistent with state law, right? And so Chuck Turner sued them and ultimately won over $106,000 settlement. And, and I believe the law remains the same, that you cannot be removed until you are officially removed, until you are convicted.
Okay, good. So I'm glad that you're ending with that very specific point, because I was a little bit confused by the news that I was reading, and because she had gone to court, and because I don't know it all, and I'm like, what is happening? Because I heard about a grand jury, so I thought all of this had already happened and manifested.
No, so that's the most important thing. We are leaving today. Grand juries are secret. They get to decide whether the federal government can move on, right? Can you move forward and indict, etc. That was the first step in the process. The prosecutors have laid down the gauntlet and said, this is what we believe we can prove. Now what happens is discovery has to start being given. The prosecution has to give Counselor Fernandez Anderson documents that they have supporting this. It's not going to remain like secret much longer. Is this staff member A? Obviously, Tanya knows who the hell it is, but that's gonna, you get to confront your accusers, right? Like you have to be able to look and see who is saying this about you, and they will be cross-examined, et cetera, when you get to trial. But essentially discovery is going to happen. There's going to be some motion practice. There might be a motion to dismiss, a motion to suppress. We can talk about all this at another time, but all of these things are going to start happening. There might be discussions about a plea deal. We'll see what occurs, right? And then ultimately there will be a trial, a jury. If Tanya does not take a plea, a jury will get to decide. They will either find her guilty or not guilty, acquit her. She might be found guilty of everything or nothing, or some, not all. And then she gets to be sentenced, and then she can appeal, right? I've seen things fall apart before trial. I've seen not guilties. I've seen guilties that were flipped on appeal. You have all of these things that can happen, but technically, pursuant to state law, the only time that a public official automatically loses their post is when they are sentenced for a felony conviction, right? So,
all right. So for the record, for those who are tuning in, nothing that happened today leads us there, because there was a lot of confusion, because a lot of folks who weren't familiar with grand juries and indictments, and then she was in court.
Or they thought it was a jury. They thought it was a trial jury. No.
So all of that already had, so I'm going to tell you, a lot of us did not know, because we felt like all of that had a grand jury. I already assumed that there was a court and everything. And then they just went
and we'll never hear from the grand jury again. We don't even know who they are, right?
So
the only thing we know, Julia, is whatever this scribble is right here, that's the foreman of the grand jury's name. And I don't know what it is. It looks like it says Petey Pablo, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't Petey Pablo that signed this. But anyway, so again, we don't know anything about the grand jury. We won't hear from them again. There might be grand jury transcripts that might ultimately come out later on. Right. But this is the beginning, and we'll see what happens next.
I'm so glad that you did this breakdown, because people need to know this is just started and that we're not.
Stacey is right. 97% of federal cases are pleas, and oftentimes people don't even have all their discovery before they do it, right? A lot of people don't have the publicity that Tanya has, right? They're just, we just kick down the door, arrest them, and nobody knows or cares, quite frankly. There's no media attention. No one's scrutinizing what it is that happened. If you're held, right, or if it happened at your mom's house or somebody's house that has Section 8 benefits, and the federal government goes in and says, hey, one of your drug deals happened here, and if you don't plea to this case, we're going to take away your mom's Section 8 voucher. We do that all the time. I don't like that, but, and I don't stand for that, or didn't as U.S. attorney, and called it out when I was an assistant U.S. attorney, but that happens all the time. So, Julia, let's decide maybe in a couple weeks again, we can do this. I think it's just important, whether we're talking about Tanya, whether we're talking about somebody else, our community needs to understand process. No question is stupid. You need to make sure you understand this shit. Excuse my language, right?
No. And the thing is that everybody, I need to understand it. Just because I'm a city council doesn't necessarily mean that I know everything. And so that's why I'm like,
can I end with one thing? And this will never happen, but I'm not saying we need to be recalcitrant or disrespectful to law enforcement, but when law enforcement speaks to you, right, or ever knocks on your door, they're not there as your friend, right? Like, our community does not get the benefit of law enforcement coming by to say, hey, just talk to us. what you say is, do you have a warrant? Am I obligated to speak to you? If you choose to, that's fine. But these are the questions you ask. Do you have a warrant? No. Oh, hey, somebody rings your bell. You open the door. Can we come in? Get your keys, walk outside and shut the fucking door, right? Mm-hmm. We'll talk here. What's going on? Or we just had a few questions. Am I legally obligated to speak to you? Nope. We're just here to ask you a few questions. What is this about? And do you have a warrant? And then you can choose to move on from there. But the more you ask, if they say, yes, we have a warrant, then why are you talking to them? Everything you are saying is voluntary information. And remember, federal agents don't have body-worn cameras, right? When the Boston police come up to you and they look like Iron Man and they have something on their chest this big that's dangling around, usually you can say later, I want the body-worn camera footage. Oh, mine was off. I'm not saying you get off immediately, but federal agents aren't wearing body-worn cameras. So it's their word against yours. Yeah. We need to talk to our community about what our rights are, not allowing people, like, they're not there to help us. They aren't. And they will, I'm not saying they're there to hurt us. That's not what I'm saying. But usually when they're there to speak with you, you just need to find out what the parameters are so you can make a well-informed decision. If you choose to speak to them, absolutely do so. But what I don't want you doing is speaking to them for 20 minutes and then at the end them saying, hey, we have a warrant. We're coming in and taking all your, it's like, would you have done that had you known it? So we got to really do the know your rights stuff.
We're going to do that. This is going to become a thing. You and I are going to be doing this. I got one clarification from Ann. What's up, Ann to George? She says, so the grand jury, she says here, the grand jury just determined whether or not the case is worth going to court, right? Or not.
And the last thing I'll say, Ann, that's a great question. The standard for a grand jury is probable cause. The standard for a trial jury is beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And correct. The grand jury is what I call the gatekeeper, right? If you don't get a true bill, literally TRUE space BILL, true bill, meaning, yes, we believe there is enough for you to move forward and indict this person and go through the process. But then that's the first hurdle. Then you have to go and present to a trial jury. And it's not probable cause. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. It's even a higher standard. Remember, grand jury, there's no judge. There's no defense attorney. It is completely private and it is run 100% by the prosecution. That's why people like to say you can indict a ham sandwich, right? Because literally no one's objecting. Julia, if all I got to do was talk all the time and tell you how great I was, everyone would love me instead of the people that are like, she's crazy. Did you know this? Did you read it? Like, there's no one else in the room. It's just you telling the grand jury everything you think that this person did wrong. No one's saying like, well, wait, but is she related to her or not? And by the way, last thing, I used to speak to every one of my grand juries when I was DA, and I used to speak to every one of my grand juries when I was U.S. attorney. I demanded to do it, and I went in, always with somebody else, and I said, thank you for your service. I'm the U.S. attorney, or I'm the DA. I want you to hear me say this. This is your grand jury, not ours. Make us do our job. Ask questions. Act as if this was someone you love that was charged with this crime. Would you just rubber stamp it, or would you want to make sure you understood? Don't let my prosecutors tell you you can't ask questions. You can. And if we don't prove our case, you heard it from me. I want you to know, Bill. And my office hated when I said that, but I did every time, because we should only be bringing cases to the grand jury that we believe are justified and that we can prove, right? And so I would tell them, ask us questions. If you have any doubt and don't think we've met our minimum burden of probable cause, no, Bill. And that's it. And we're done, right?
Yeah. And I'm going to end with this. And I think it's important, regardless of who this is happening to, what can community be doing right now to help support someone who's going through something like this. Because I what I hate is what you see, how everybody just piles up and everybody's on the internet and everybody's on social media, blah blah blah.
Look,
Like,
I just think, Julia, you can show kindness. You can believe that Tanya, forget about Tanya. You can believe a defendant deserves what's happening to them, but you can also be decent, right? And I think what I don't like, and I've suffered from that. I'm not a victim. I'm not asking anyone to weep a tear for me, but I can promise you that what happened to me was excessive. I know what happened to me was excessive, for sure, right? They don't do that to other people. When they dislike you, they make sure they hit you so hard that you'll never get up again. And the problem is we get up, right? Like,
I know.
It was a standing 9 count for me. I will put it out there, right? But fuck you, right? Like, I mean, that's my response, right? Okay, that's fine. So I'm not, you know what? You'll never take away from me the fact that I was the elected district attorney and the first woman to ever do it. And I'm the first Black woman to ever be the U.S. attorney for the district of it. You can never take that away from me. And I resigned on my own accord. And I don't know what's going to happen with Tanya, but you can show decency and you don't have to talk about the facts of the case, but you don't kick people when they're down, right? Like, that's bullying behavior. It's cowardice. And I believe, for me, I just want to make sure we wait until the process. I'm not a member of the Boston City Council. I can't tell the mayor or the president what to do. They are fully entitled to their opinions. But I promise you, if they were indicted and, there's a long list of people that the U.S. attorney, I saw those lists, right? Like, there's a long list of people that they were looking at, and what I can tell you is it feels really good being holier than thou until somebody knocks on your door one day, right? And so, or somebody misunderstands you. So what I can say is just, take the bass out of your voice, show some kindness. And, again, it's a lonely feeling when you are, even if she did some of this, or even if you did some of it, but you're misunderstood, or even if you did all of it, right? It still hurts, right? And you still can show decency to a person. That's how I would end, right? And somebody who has experienced this, it's lonely when it happens. And the people that reach out to you, it means the world. Even if you don't talk about what happened, but you just say, like, look, this sucks. I'm sorry. It's probably going to get worse, but you're going to get through this. And I'm really sorry it's happening to you, right? That doesn't mean, like, girl, we're riding at dawn. You don't need to do any of that, right? But what you need to do is, I hope, show some compassion.
That's right. And with that, we're going to end, because I think that it's a beautiful note to end with, and great platform, amazing opportunity. Thank you, Stacey. And thank you, everyone who tuned in.
I know, our people.
We have we had over 21 people here live. We got lots of love and lots of hearts, and and this is just on Facebook. There's also, we're on different we're everywhere. I don't know. Woke is everywhere right now. And we'll share this, because I think the more people who understand this, and, the better place we're going to be when we are doing our own media, and when we're telling our own stories, and we're reclaiming the narrative. And this is what we need more of. And so thank you. Good night and good all. And don't forget, everybody, to stay woke. Thank you, Rachel. This was the best. This is like, I love you. I appreciate you. You will always be my ride or die. And that is facts.
Yes.
And let's go. Let's keep
all
doing
right.
it.
I'll talk to you soon, sweet pea.
Okay, baby. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. So, okay, guys. So that was it. I'm doing the outro. I'm going to end. Don't forget to stay woke. This is what it looks like when we're showing up for each other. We're going to reclaim the narrative. We're going to tell our own stories, and we're going to continue to uplift each other. Have a beautiful night. Stay woke.